I'm Lila Brenner, 34 freelance graphic designer and second daughter of the Brenner family. I was standing outside the driveway of what used to be our childhood home, or rather, what remained of it. A half-collapsed frame, blackened with soot, stood like a skeleton against the dimming sky. Caution tape fluttered across the iron gate like a warning not to enter the past. I held a large manila envelope in one hand, my other buried deep in the pocket of my navy trench coat. My boots crunched over gravel and ash as I approached the temporary white tent where officials were still sorting through debris. Across the yard, my brother Ethan stood with his back to me, talking animatedly to a group of family friends. He was in his usual khakis and crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled neatly to the elbows, like he always dressed for the spotlight. Laughter floated up from the group, but not once did anyone glance in my direction. I wasn't introduced. I wasn't even waved over. I stepped up to the tent. A young man in a neon vest, clipboard in hand, held out his arm. "Ma'am, this area is restricted unless you're immediate family or listed on the property file," he said firmly. I blinked. "I grew up here. My name's Lila Brenner." He glanced at the clipboard, hesitated. "Oh, I see an Ethan Brenner as primary point of contact." My jaw tightened. He wasn't the one the insurance company called. I was. The man looked unsure, glancing between his clipboard and me. Just then, a sharp, familiar voice called out from behind him. "She can go through." Everyone turned. It was Mrs. Holloway, our family's former attorney and longtime friend of our late father. She walked briskly toward us, hair pulled into its signature tight bun, black coat whipping behind her like a judge's robe. "She's not just family," she said loudly enough for everyone in the tent and beyond to hear. "She's the legal beneficiary of the insurance claim on the property. The house is listed under her name." Silence. Every conversation on the lawn behind us stopped. Ethan turned around, his brows furrowing. I could feel a dozen eyes swing my way like floodlights. The clipboard man stepped back quickly. "Apologies, Ms. Brenner. Go ahead." I walked past him, slowly, every step feeling heavier under the weight of everyone's gaze. For a moment, I stood at the edge of the ruined porch. Charred beams collapsed like broken ribs. I could still picture the blue wallpaper in the hallway, the scent of my mother's cinnamon tea in the winter, the dent in the third stair Ethan always tripped over. It was gone, but I was still standing. I turned to face the crowd. Ethan had taken a step forward, expression unreadable. I took a breath, then looked into the camera lens. If you've ever been the forgotten one in your family, the one nobody thought would be called, would be chosen, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if this story feels even a little like yours, like, subscribe, and share it. You're not alone, not even close. And then I turned back to the ash and ruin that somehow still belonged to me. After Mrs. Holloway made the announcement, no one said a word for a solid 30 seconds. It was one of those rare moments where even the breeze held its breath. I didn't bask in it. That kind of attention has always made my skin crawl, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel something settle inside me, like a heavy coin finally dropped into the bottom of a well. The sound echoed louder in silence than I thought it would. Ethan broke the stillness first. He walked toward me slowly, not rushing, not smiling, just wearing that same carefully calibrated expression he used at board meetings and barbecues, concerned but calm. I knew it well. Our family did a lot of things, but transparency wasn't one of them. "I didn't know you were going to be here today," he said, stopping a few feet away from me. "I was told to meet the claims adjuster." I said simply, "They emailed me directly. Said it was in my name." He nodded, slowly. "That's odd. Dad said, I mean. I assumed it would be under me." since I stayed behind. Of course he had. Ethan had taken over Dad's real estate firm after college. When Mom passed, and I moved to New York for art school, he became the one who handled things: house repairs, hospital appointments, taxes. It made sense in everyone's mind that the home, the legacy, would pass to him. But Dad and I had a different conversation before he died. Just the two of us. One Ethan never knew about. You assumed, I echoed quietly. His gaze flicked over my shoulder, to the charred remains of our front door. This place. It should have stayed in the family. I thought that's what we agreed. It did stay in the family, I replied. I am family. He didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked back to his group, slipping easily back into their orbit, offering nods, small smiles, his hand on someone's shoulder. I stood where I was, the manila envelope still in my grip. Mrs. Holloway came to stand beside me. He didn't know. I said without looking at her. He would have, if he'd read the will thoroughly. She said matter-of-factly. But that's always been his flaw. He skims what doesn't center him. I let out a sound somewhere between a breath and a laugh. That sounds like something Dad would say. She gave me a side glance. It is. We walked together toward the back of the property, where the porch swing once creaked in the afternoons. There was nothing left but melted metal chains and a deep gouge in the ground where the tree had caught fire. Do you remember the Christmas when the roof leaked and we moved the tree into the kitchen? She asked suddenly. I do. I smiled. We decorated it with plastic spoons because Ethan used all the ornaments for his science fair volcano. And you were furious, she added. I was 11, I said, laughing under my breath. I made a tinsel banner that said, "Science killed Santa." Mrs. Holloway chuckled. Your dad took a photo of that. It was his favorite Christmas picture. I looked at her. He told you that. He told me a lot of things, mostly about you. He wanted you to have this place. Not because he didn't love Ethan, but because he knew you'd need it more. Not as a house, as a root. That word root stayed in my mouth like honey and ash. A low beep interrupted us. My phone. I pulled it out. Another email from the insurance company. The subject line read, "Final damage estimate and disbursement authorization." I showed it to her. They want a signature today. Then we sign it. She said, Your name is on it. Not Ethan's. Not even the firm's. I hesitated. This is going to start something. Lila, she said firmly. This already is something. We found a small folding table under the adjuster's tent. A staff member offered me a pen, and I placed the envelope beside the contract. Before I could sign, I paused and looked out again at the house at the yard where Ethan and I used to chase lightning bugs. At the cracked stones of the path Mom laid herself. At the empty swing where Dad used to read his newspaper while I sketched from the porch. Then I signed my name, Lila Brenner. No flourish, no drama, just ink on paper. A few minutes later, Ethan approached again. Alone this time. I just talked to the adjuster. He said, They said the funds will go into a trust under your name. Is that true? It is. He stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for something: remorse, apology, confusion. I'm not sure, but I didn't flinch. Finally, he asked, So, what are you going to do with it? I looked at the ruin again. I'm not sure, but I know I won't rebuild it as it was. Ethan shifted on his feet. Dad said he wanted to keep the land in the family. So did Mom. I haven't forgotten that, I said. And I haven't forgotten that we're still family, even if no one invited me to the last 4 holidays. His eyes flickered, then dropped. That wasn't about you. It always is, I said. But my voice was soft. When you forget someone, It's always The sun was sinking low now. The air smelled of damp earth and smoke. I walked to the edge of the yard, where a crooked mailbox still stood with the number 1128 burned halfway off. I brushed ash from the flap and opened it. Inside was a single, water-damaged postcard. The image of a mountain lake and two stick figures, one with red pigtails, the other with a baseball cap. I smiled. Ethan and me. The drawing I made when I was 6. Dad used it as a bookmark for years. As I stood there, quiet, unseen again by most of the world, I didn't feel small. I felt returned. Not to a home, but to something older. Something my father had known all along. The postcard stayed in my hand long after the sun had slipped behind the pines. I traced the smudged ink lines of my childhood drawing like I was rediscovering a language I used to speak fluently. The red pigtails were mine, drawn too thick, and the stick figure beside me held a bat over his head that was Ethan, always ready to win something. I remembered sitting on the porch one afternoon with Dad, sketching on that exact postcard while he read the paper. He'd looked over and said, "That's a good likeness, but you forgot the shadows." I hadn't understood what he meant then, but standing in the literal shadow of our burnt home, I think I finally did. Back at my car. I sat in the front seat, envelope on the passenger side, postcard in my hand. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Ethan. "Ethan, let's talk soon. I want to get ahead of this before the rest of the family finds out." Of course. Not, "I'm proud of you." Not, "That must have been hard." Just strategy. I locked the phone and leaned my head back against the headrest. Above me, the sky stretched black and quiet, speckled with stars that felt indifferent and eternal. I let the silence stretch, let the ash settle in my lungs. Then I drove. Not home. Not the apartment I rented in the city where my neighbors barely knew my name. I drove to the one place that still felt like a question mark, my Aunt Lorraine's. She lived just 15 minutes from the old house, in a cluttered one-story ranch filled with porcelain cats and old Reader's Digest magazines stacked like bricks. She opened the door with a surprised look, one hand still clutching a crossword puzzle. "Lila," she blinked. "You're alive." "Apparently." I smiled. "Do you have tea?" 15 minutes later, I was curled on her threadbare couch, mug in hand. She hadn't asked why I came. That was her way. Lorraine always waited for words to arrive like company, not guests to be dragged in. "I went to the house today," I said finally. She nodded slowly. "Saw it on the news?" "Terrible thing. Thought they would have called Ethan." "They did. And me." She looked over, lifting an eyebrow. "It's under my name," I said. Her other eyebrow joined the first. "Your father didn't tell me that. He told me. In person. Years ago." She set down her mug. "Let me guess. Ethan wasn't thrilled. He handled it like a politician." I said. He smiled, nodded, and is probably drafting a very polite email to the rest of the family as we speak. Aunt Lorraine gave a small huff. "Sounds about right. That boy's got more filters than a coffee shop." We both laughed. Then the room fell quiet again. "Can I ask you something?" I said softly. "Of course. Why did no one ever ask me to come home to help with Dad? To just be part of things?" She looked down at her hands, gnarled now with age and arthritis. Because you weren't easy to categorize. Ethan was the one who took over. You were the one who left. People like it when things are tidy, predictable. You made them nervous. Sweetheart, I was a graphic designer, not a cult leader. I said, half joking. You were your own person. She corrected. And around here, that's the same thing. That sentence lingered. It was true, in a way. In our family, Ethan was always the heir, the speaker, the one who went first. I was the afterthought, the creative one, the girl who painted murals on her bedroom wall and got caught kissing girls behind the school gym in 10th grade. I didn't fit in their scripts, so they stopped casting me, but my father saw me. He told me to keep this safe, I said, pulling out the envelope. He didn't want me to rebuild the house as it was. He wanted me to build something different. Lorraine nodded slowly. Then do it. Don't ask for permission. I left her house around midnight, feeling clearer than I had in weeks. The next morning, I made 3 calls, one to the insurance company to confirm the disbursement, one to a local architect, and one to an unfamiliar number I found in an old notebook. A woman's voice answered, warm, a little raspy. "This is Marion," she said. "Hi," I said, heart suddenly racing. "I don't know if you remember me. I'm Lila Brenner." "You taught me art at Ridgeville High, oh my God," she interrupted. "Lila, you used to paint faces on your tests. How could I forget?" I laughed. "I was wondering, do you still take on community projects? I'm thinking about starting something public." She paused. "You mean like a mural?" "No," I said. "I mean like a space, a center, a real place, for art and memory and community, on land that used to be my family's home." Another pause. Then, "Lila, if you're serious, I'm in." By the end of the week, I had plans. And for once, I didn't ask Ethan's opinion. But the family dinner came anyway, an emergency gathering organized by my cousin Rachel at her farmhouse. Everyone was there, even Uncle Dean, who hadn't spoken more than 3 words to me since I got my nose pierced at 19. I walked in and felt it immediately, that hush that falls when someone enters who was previously unmentioned. The air was thick with casserole and curiosity. Ethan was seated at the head of the table. Of course. He stood as I walked in, tried to gesture me toward an empty seat beside him. I ignored it and sat beside Lorraine instead. Rachel was the first to speak. "So, Lila, we heard you signed the insurance payout." I nodded. "Yes, it's in motion." Dean snorted. "And you didn't think to consult the rest of us?" "I didn't think it was necessary." I said, "My name is on the documents, not yours." A low hum went through the room. Ethan raised a hand. "Let's not turn this into a fight," he said. "We're all surprised. That's all." "You're surprised I didn't disappear again," I said. He flinched. "No one said that. You didn't have to." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were the early sketches from the architect blueprints of an open courtyard with art classrooms, garden spaces, and an indoor gallery. I laid it on the table. "I'm turning the land into a community art center," I said. "It'll be called the Ashroot Project." Aunt Lorraine smiled beside me. Rachel leaned over the drawing, eyebrows lifting. "It's actually beautiful," she murmured. Dean looked unimpressed. Ethan looked lost. "Why not rebuild the house?" he asked. "Why erase it completely because it burned?" I said, "Because nothing can bring it back, but something new can rise from it." For once, no one had a clever comeback. I looked around the table. Some faces softened. Others remained hard. But I wasn't there for their approval. I was there to speak. Finally, in my own voice. I'd spent most of my life thinking my silence was strength, that being overlooked was safer than being seen, but it wasn't true. Being silent just made it easier for everyone else to tell my story for me. Not anymore. I folded the folder closed, stood up, and said, "Anyone who wants to help, you're welcome. Anyone who doesn't, I understand." Then I walked out, leaving the blueprint behind on the table. The door shut behind me, but I didn't feel shut out. I felt free. 2 weeks later, the land was cleared. The debris from the fire had been removed, and in its place, raw earth lay exposed, wounded but ready. The charred foundation of the old house was gone, leaving a strange emptiness, like a tooth pulled from a familiar smile. But I didn't grieve it anymore. I stood in the middle of the lot, boots crunching over gravel and soil, arms crossed, watching the surveyors map out stakes for the first lines of construction. Marion was beside me, shielding her eyes from the morning sun. She was wearing paint-splattered jeans and a red scarf that flapped in the wind. "This is wild," she said, grinning. "You've actually done it." "Not yet," I said, trying to suppress the nerves that danced behind my ribs. "We've just started." She nodded. "True. But the start is usually the hardest part." Behind us, the team unloaded wooden frames, and I caught sight of the first delivery of reclaimed brick. The design we agreed on used salvaged materials from nearby demolitions. It would be a space born from loss, but made for creation. "I've started collecting pieces for the first exhibit," Marion said, her voice lower now. "Drawings from local kids, paintings from senior citizens at the rec center, pieces from voices that don't get gallery space." "Perfect," I said. The vision for the Ashroot project had come in fragments at first: memories, sketches, night thoughts. But slowly it began to take shape. A circular structure, built around an open courtyard, inspired by the way Dad used to say, "The only stories that matter are the ones told in the round." He meant family stories, of course. But this center would be for more than that, for stories left untold, overlooked, dismissed, just like I'd been. A few days later, I received a message from my cousin Rachel. She'd attached a short flyer she was working on for the community newsletter Ashroot Center, where lost roots grow new. I blinked at the screen. It wasn't exactly the slogan I had in mind, but it made something behind my eyes ache. Later that afternoon, I got another surprise. I was standing on the porch of the temporary office trailer when Ethan's silver Lexus pulled up to the edge of the property. I watched through the tinted window as he stepped out, adjusting the cuffs of his jacket like he was arriving at a ribbon cutting. For a moment, I considered hiding in the trailer old habits, but something in me held steady. He walked up slowly, surveying the cleared lot, the fresh construction materials, the first upright frame of what would be the main studio hall. "This looks serious," he said finally. "It is." There was a long pause. I drove by twice before stopping. "Thought about not getting out." "But you did." He nodded, looking away toward the pine trees at the edge of the land. "I couldn't stop thinking about that postcard. The one you showed me years ago with the two stick figures. Me with the bat, you with the red pigtails." I hadn't realized he remembered it. "I thought I threw that out," I murmured. "You gave it to Dad when you were 6. He kept it in his wallet. I saw it the night before the funeral." He turned to face me, his voice quieter now. "I didn't know he changed the insurance. Or the will. I thought I was supposed to carry everything, that it was all on me." "That's what everyone told you," I said, "and they told me to get out of your way." He looked ashamed. "I didn't ask them to." "I know," I said. "But you didn't stop them either." He flinched, but nodded. "You're right." We stood in silence again. 2 grown adults staring at the land where we'd once raced tricycles and made forts out of leaves. It was so strange how something could be gone, and yet feel more alive than it ever had. I saw the blueprints, Ethan said. Rachel sent them. It's not what I expected. That's the point. He shifted his weight. Do you want help? I looked at him. Not his clothes, not his face, but him. The brother who used to carry me on his back through the sprinkler. The boy who cried when I ran away at 15 and called Dad from a bus station. The man who forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. Why, I asked softly. He blinked. Because maybe I want to earn my place here. That word again. Place. I studied him. Then I nodded once. All right. We'll start with Saturday cleanup. No board seats. No speeches. He gave a crooked smile. Deal. That Saturday? Ethan showed up in jeans and a faded hoodie. He picked up garbage, hauled bricks, scrubbed windows. He didn't complain. Didn't post about it. Marian nodded in quiet approval but didn't fuss. Every evening after construction ended, I sat on the new wooden stairs of the center's entryway and looked at the sky. The old trees that survived the blaze, the newly planted ones we were placing in the garden plot. I started to sketch again for me, not for clients' faces of the volunteers, shapes of the walls, memories that came in flashes. I received an email from Mrs. Holloway a few days later. She attached a scan of a handwritten letter from Dad, dated 3 months before his death. Lila, if you're reading this, you've already done more than anyone expected. I saw you. Always. Even when no one else did. The house will burn. I know it. But you'll build something better. Not for the family. For the forgotten. I printed it out and taped it to the back wall of my studio. Then, just as the frame of the final building went up, Aunt Lorraine came to visit. She wore her best church shoes, which immediately got stuck in the soft mud near the entrance, but she refused to take them off. This place is loud, she said, looking around at the colorful murals being painted by teens on the courtyard walls. It's supposed to be. She smiled. Your mother would have hated it. That's how I know it's perfect. I laughed, then grew quiet. Do you think they'd be proud? She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me. Really looked. Like I was both the question and the answer she'd waited decades to understand. I think you became exactly who you were always meant to be, and you didn't need anyone's permission. That night, the community held a lantern vigil at the edge of the Ashroot Center. Dozens of people came, some I knew. Most I didn't. Children who'd painted in our pop-up classes. Elders who donated family heirlooms for our gallery wall. Volunteers who brought soil and bricks and hands. As the lanterns rose into the dark, glowing orange and gold, I felt something inside me lift too. Not relief, not triumph, just a quiet undoing. I didn't need to be the favorite, or the successful one, or the forgotten one who proved them all wrong. I just needed to be the one who stayed, and I had. The first night I slept at the Ashroot Center, it was still unfinished. No curtains, no heat, the insulation barely up, and the smell of fresh sawdust thick in the air. But I had brought a sleeping bag and a thermos of peppermint tea, and that was enough. I unrolled my mat in what would become the central gallery room, directly beneath the circular skylight. The stars were invisible behind scaffolding, but I imagined them anyway, above me, unseen, but watching. Ethan had texted earlier that day a simple message. Ethan got approval for donated benches. Dropping them off tomorrow. Let me know where you want them. No punctuation, no small talk. But I read between the lines. It meant I'm still here. I'm trying. And that was enough. I thought of how far we'd come. from cold glances across funeral pews to quiet collaboration on weekends. He never apologized in words. Not really. But he worked. He stayed late. He swept the floor without being asked. And maybe, in the end, that was better than a speech. Marion came by around 10 the next morning with fresh bagels and a folder of workshop schedules. She'd somehow roped 3 retired teachers, a ceramicist, and a violinist into volunteering. She called it a miracle. I called it Marion being Marion. "You have a minute?" she asked, leaning against the half-painted wall of the north corridor. I nodded, wiping my hands on my jeans. She handed me a form with a big red stamp across the top. Grant approved. I blinked. Wait, this is from the state. Marion grinned. $50,000 for rural creative healing and memory reconstruction projects. Your proposal hit a nerve. Lila. They loved it. My throat tightened. I reread the form 3 times just to make sure it wasn't a misprint. Marion laughed. You should have seen the woman's face when I told her the land used to be a burned-down family home. She teared up, said she lost her childhood house too. That afternoon, I printed the grant letter and pinned it beside Dad's handwritten note in the gallery office. 2 different documents, 2 different types of faith. By spring, the first exhibition was ready. We called it What Survived. It featured paintings from local kids, photos recovered from fire-damaged houses, poems from those who had lost spouses, farms, identities. The opening night was a blur of voices, soft music, and tea lights. People drifted from room to room like ghosts in reverse, not fading, but coming back into form. I stood near the entrance, welcoming people, shaking hands, smiling until my cheeks ached. Then, near the end of the evening, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned and it was my mother's sister, Aunt June. We hadn't spoken in 6 years. She wore her old green coat with the fur collar. Her hair curled just like it always was when I was a child. She looked smaller than I remembered, not just older, but as if someone had gently folded her in. I saw the article in the paper, she said softly. I wasn't sure if I should come. You're here now. I replied, neutral but not cold. She nodded. I was angry with your father for giving you the house. I know. I thought it meant he didn't trust Ethan. It didn't, I said. It just meant he trusted me too. She swallowed. This place. It's beautiful. We stood in silence for a moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a worn envelope. I found this in your mother's drawer after she passed. She said, I didn't know what to do with it, but I think it's yours now. She pressed it into my hand, then walked away before I could open it. I stood by the light of the gallery window and peeled it open. Inside was a Polaroid, faded but clear. It was me, age 7, standing in the backyard in my overalls, paintbrush in one hand, the shed wall behind me covered in purple butterflies I'd drawn myself. And below that, in my mother's looping cursive Lila, always seeing beauty where no one else does. For the first time in a long time, I let myself cry, not from pain, but from being seen, even if it came too late for her to say it aloud. In the weeks that followed, the Ashroot Center blossomed. We hosted storytelling circles, mural workshops, grief poetry nights. People came not to consume, but to contribute, to remember, to remake. I started a series of paintings in the evenings after everyone left. I called them Inheritance. Each one depicted a different version of the house as it was, as it burned, as it now lived in imagination. I hung them in the west hallway with no name on the plaque. People guessed at the artist. No one asked me directly. I liked it that way. One evening, as I was locking up, Ethan appeared at the door. He had a framed piece under his arm. "It's done," he said. I let him in. He walked to the back hallway and hung it himself a pencil drawing of the old stairwell, complete with the third step dent. Simple, clean, honest. "You drew this?" I asked. Surprised. "I took a class," he said. "Thought I'd try to remember something, instead of just maintaining it." I smiled. "It's perfect." He turned to me, finally meeting my eyes. "I'm glad Dad chose you," he said. "Even if I didn't understand it at first, I think he chose both of us." I said, "Just differently." He nodded. "You think he'd like this place?" I looked around at the warm light, the scattered paintbrushes, the fading sound of laughter from the afternoon's class. "I think he'd stand right here," I said, "and tell us the skylight's crooked." We both laughed. The months rolled on. The Ashroot project became something more than a building. It became a landmark. Schools brought buses. Local therapists offered free sessions on site. Weddings were held in the garden. People left letters in the mailbox addressed to someone who understands. And every year, on the anniversary of the fire, we held a quiet vigil. No speeches, just lanterns. And one rule: each person could write one memory, one regret, or one hope on a slip of paper and bury it in the center courtyard. The land became sacred in a new way, not because of what it once held, but because of what it was now entrusted with. And me, I stayed. Not forever, maybe, but long enough. Long enough to see the ghosts soften. Long enough to forgive myself for leaving. Long enough to forgive them for letting me go. And when people asked what the Ashroot name meant, I always smiled. "It's about what's underneath," I'd say. "The part that doesn't burn."